Schlitzie the Pinhead was one of the most famous circus sideshow acts ever. His unusual appearance attracted swarms of audiences, but his life was incredibly hard behind the scenes. Schlitzie's most recognizable feature was his small head, the result of a disorder called microcephaly. People with this condition have skulls that are far smaller than a typical skull, and they're often conical toward the crown of the head. That much is clear. The truth is that microcephaly can be a symptom of several other issues. It can be due to genetics, fetal alcohol syndrome, the Zika virus, or a number of other problems. While sources say that Schlitzie was born with microcephaly, others say that he developed the condition later on. His body grew, but his head didn't. Each of these possibilities can indicate different causes, so it's unclear exactly how Schlitzie came to be microcephalic. It doesn't seem that he was ever seriously examined by any doctor, and medicine in the early 20th century was far more rudimentary than it is now, so it's likely that doctors wouldn't have been able to find out anything anyway, especially without a family or medical history or any other information to go on. Since we know next to nothing about Schlitzie's birth, we also don't know much about his childhood, other than his last name was probably Surtees. Some sources say that his parents kept him either in an attic or a basement, but one thing we can be pretty sure of is that Schlitzie's parents probably sold him to the circus. Decades after slavery was outlawed, selling a child with a disability was not exactly legal, but people certainly looked the other way. Schlitzie went on to work for just about every popular circus that existed during his lifetime, including big names like Barnum and Bailey and Ringling Brothers, as he was traded, sold, and lent to various circus owners. This was actually common practice at the time, despite how horrifying it sounds. Because circuses typically followed a specific route of cities each year, the owners wanted to keep things fresh, and so they would frequently swap out attractions in hope of bringing new customers to cities they had been to before. This meant that sideshow performers often moved between circuses and constantly visited new cities. While performers who were more able-minded might have had some say in this, those with intellectual disabilities like Schlitzie likely had no choice whatsoever. Because of Schlitzie's cognitive difficulties, it's said that he behaved a lot like an excitable child. He had a sense of wonder and joy that audiences loved and kept them coming back to see him. He could sing, dance, and even parrot people, and audiences ate it all up. One of his most popular acts was quite simple. He would count from 1 to 10, though it's said that he would often skip the number 7. It's not certain if Schlitzie had trouble remembering it or if it was part of the act and he skipped it on purpose for laughs. But audiences weren't the only ones upon whom Schlitzie left a mark. His nurses and caregivers are said to have loved him, and fellow performers were also very fond of him and made sure he was taken care of. While he never had a family per se, the circuses he worked for made sure to treat him as family. On the occasions that audiences were cruel to Schlitzie, the other circus workers would quickly stop the abusive audience members and make them leave. Schlitzie's most famous acting appearance was in the 1932 horror film Freaks, in which he effectively played himself. However, the movie's Schlitzie was female both on stage and off. He gets a good amount of screen time, and his performance is a great way for modern audiences to experience his personality and see his charm in action.
I wish you were man with this in my time.
Why, Schlitzie, what's the matter?
And this wasn't Schlitzie's only film role. He played a sideshow performer in 1928's The Sideshow and 1941's Meet Boston Blackie, and he appeared in 1932's The Island of Lost Souls, an early adaptation of H.G. Wells' novel The Island of Dr. Moreau, as one of the Manimals. But his most unusual role came in the exploitation film Tomorrow's Children, which was meant to showcase the evils of forced sterilization, common practice at the time for criminals or those with disabilities. Schlitzie has a brief role as a criminal sentenced to sterilization, and unusually for him, he appears with a full head of hair and a beard. One sad truth about sideshow performers is that many of them had shorter than average lives. Schlitzie was actually one of the exceptions to this. He died on September 24, 1971, and according to his own death certificate, he lived to the age of 70. However, that birth date is unconfirmed, so it's possible that Schlitzie was older, possibly even in his 80s when he passed away. His cause of death was listed as bronchial pneumonia brought on by medullary depression. Schlitzie was quite poor at the end of his life, and thus he wasn't able to afford a grave marker. In 2007, a Schlitzie fan named Scott Michaels visited Schlitzie's grave in California. He remarked upon the lack of a gravestone on his website, so members of the site's message board decided to see what they could do about the situation. One of them called up Queen of Heaven Cemetery and found out there was a balance that needed to be paid off and that a new marker could be placed there. So the site's members held a little fundraiser, and after raising a few $100s, Schlitzie's balance was paid, and a small ground-level marker was added to the plot. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.